Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a research analyst with Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on manganese exploration and development today. We will hear from Charles FitzRoy, CEO of Giyani Metals. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print during this Giyani Metals webinar. Forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Giyani corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, giyanimetals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. And please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Giyani. So we have Giyani Metals presenting today. Giyani is focused on advancing manganese projects in Botswana. When we talk about NMC batteries, we most often hear about the N for nickel and the C for cobalt, but there aren't as many stories out there focused on the manganese. And Giyani is one of the few companies with an advanced manganese project, and it's located in the established mining jurisdiction of Botswana. With that, I now turn it over to Charles to update our audience on the company.
Thanks, Tim, for that intro, and very good to be presenting here today. So yes, I'm the CEO of Giyani Metals Corp. My name is Charlie FitzRoy, and I've come here to talk about our company and what we're up to, and also battery-grade manganese, which again is a vital component for the widespread EV adoption. We are seeing a huge demand growth in battery-grade manganese, with OEM groups moving towards higher manganese content batteries. I'll talk a bit about that later. And this demand, which is really sort of starting to come into the market in sort of 27, 28, is perfect for Giyani. We're developing a project in Botswana, which will help fill that demand by coming into production around 2027 and start ramping up there. So we'll very fit nicely into that demand profile, which is coming from these new battery chemistries, which is really increasing that demand. So just going forwards, this is obviously the forward-looking statement, which was discussed earlier, so please pay attention to that and have a read through if you want to. So Giyani is a battery-grade manganese developer, and we are looking towards becoming one of the dominant Western producers of battery-grade manganese for the EV market and other battery markets. Giyani has some key things attributed to it, which puts it at the forefront and one of the best companies to be looking at in this space, which is growing now because of this demand, which I mentioned earlier. Our projects and assets are primarily located in Botswana, which is a tier 1 mining jurisdiction. It's routinely ranked by the Fraser Institute as the top jurisdiction in Africa for mining investments, and we'll talk about that later. Manganese is having a huge growth in demand, and we're seeing in the last 12 months quite a dramatic change in demand profiles from batteries like LMFP, which is an additional manganese to the LFP, which we've all heard about, and then NMC batteries. So we have NMC batteries, which have historically been high nickel, now towards having a medium nickel content and also higher manganese content. So that is going to help push this demand growth. Manganese, of course, is a low carbon content metal, and compared to nickel and cobalt, it does have a lower carbon footprint. Again, another reason why OEMs are pushing towards that, which is helping towards the green economy and the energy transition, which we're all very much involved with. What puts us apart from maybe some of our competitors and other groups is where we are located. Botswana is a phenomenal place to be developing this project. We've got our environmental authorization in just 9 months from submittal, and also our mine license in 9 months from submittal. So that shows how quickly we can get things done in Botswana. So it's really quite a fantastic place to be developing a project. And from a credibility perspective, we are in a credible jurisdiction with a strong team, and also very much the company is lining up and pushing into that demand profile, which is coming from the manganese market 2027, 28 onwards. Giyani has recently this year secured 26 million in funding from two strategic partners. One is the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa, who have a $16 million facility with them. We have a convertible loan with them. And then Arch Private Equity Group with $10 million from them earlier this year. So you can see Arch had about just under 20% of the company. At the end of Q2 this year, we had just under 19 million Canadian, with another 12 million Canadian to come from the IDC facility. So we're very well funded, and I'll talk more about what those funds are to do. So right now we're developing our demonstration plant in Johannesburg, which is a 1:10 scale of our planned commercial plant, which will be in Botswana next to our manganese oxide ore assets. We have just under 2,000 square kilometers of prospecting license. So we have a huge amount of potential ore sources for our project. And I'll talk more about it later. About the key thing about Giyani is our proprietary process, which we've developed. And that enables us to produce the high purity product, which is required for battery grade manganese. So why is manganese becoming a more talked about element? And also why is it important for manganese projects outside of China, where over 90% of the current output of manganese is? So we're developing a plant which will produce high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate, which is the preferred form of battery grade manganese. Currently, there's about 90% of that market is in China. Last year, just under 300,000 tons were produced of the product. So with the recent US IRA's Inflation Reduction Act and also the EU Critical Raw Materials Act, there have been limits placed on the critical mineral components of batteries that can come from countries like China, which is pushing a demand growth in battery projects outside of China. So we're located in Botswana. As you can see from this chart, a lot of nickel and cobalt, where I talked about earlier from the NMC's perspective. Nickel and cobalt are quite localized to a location. So nickel can be localized to Indonesia, with a huge proportion of it comes from there currently. And then cobalt, a huge proportion of cobalt comes from the DRC. With manganese, you don't have that geographic localization. So we're developing a project in Botswana. Element 25 are developing a project in Australia. Manganese developing one in Europe. South 32 in Arizona. There's projects in Gabon, projects in Morocco. So manganese is not located to one area, which makes it much more stable from that aspect. And it is an element which can be developed in a more geographic spread, which is obviously good for groups trying to develop it. So it's not localized in one spot. So there is definitely potential for quite a large proportion of demand coming from outside China. So now we've established that, obviously you want to understand what is the demand profile for manganese. Well, the EV uptake, so you'll see from all the news flow, we had one out recently which was showing the US has had 3 consecutive quarters of record EV sales. And from the current battery chemistries, we're seeing quite a large demand for manganese. For example, in the EU from 2023 to 2030, we're seeing a 4 times demand increase in manganese. And the US and Canada, it's even more so. It's about 7 times demand increase. And that's the current chemistry mixes. And we know a lot of OEM groups are looking into other chemistries which have more manganese, like LMFP and mid-nickel and mid-manganese style chemistry. So that will only increase that demand profile. So there's a huge amount of potential for manganese demand in 2030 and moving into beyond that. As we see, a lot of the demand profile kicks on from 27, 28. With NMC batteries and LMFP, there's a lot of abbreviations there. There's generally two main groupings of batteries. You've got NMC batteries and I write on this. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. So these are the NMC style batteries, and these are LFP. So that's the largely primary 2 types of battery chemistries which are looking prevalent going forwards. And you'll see in the LFP, you have your LMFP here. This is this orange band. So that band, until quite recently, was actually quite smaller. So in the last 6 months, that band has grown, which means that there is more and more demand profile coming in the LMFP, and groups are trying to develop it because adding that manganese to the LFP really increases energy density and makes it a more, increases range. And then we see the NMC, which are these batteries up here. We're seeing the growth in the mid nickel chemistries. So it's these groups. So it's these chemistries here. We're seeing a growth, which you'll see from the chart here, have the higher manganese content. And then from earlier, I spoke about LMFP, which has a very high manganese content. So we are seeing OEM groups pushing towards higher manganese content batteries. And that's very important, as I said, because that's where we see this is demand coming. For example, we're seeing some forecasts where there's forecasted by 2034 about 1.6 million tons of high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate. And last year we produced about 300,000 tons of it. So you can see it's about 1.3, 1.2 million ton gap. And Giyani, for example, is looking at producing something in the realm of 100,000 tons of manganese sulfate monohydrate. So you can see there's a huge amount of Giyani required to fill that gap. And that makes, obviously shows that where Giyani is in the market, there's quite a lot of demand from our story. So we see the demand coming. We see the OEMs pushing towards high manganese content batteries. And you'll see on this chart here, which shows the different battery types that we are looking at from going forwards, which all point towards higher manganese content, and that enables us as a group to be very confident in what we're seeing going forward and the demand for that. So Giyani is a group. You'll see over the last 4 years or so, Giyani has developed its project in country. And we've developed a proprietary process which enables us to produce that high purity battery manganese at 99.97 purity. And that's vital because the OEM groups need a very high purity product to be able to produce their battery product and a consistent product. And right now we're ramping up our demonstration plant, which is in Johannesburg, which is a 1 to 10 scale of our planned commercial facility. And we put an announcement out this week actually saying that our demo plant has commenced commissioning. And we're on track now for producing a product, battery manganese project from it in this quarter. So we've had a really good run up for the last 4 years of developing this project, and now we're pushing into that phase of final product, developing product for our off-taker testing. So end of this year we will be producing product for off-takers. Going to next year we will be negotiating off-take contracts and finishing off our DFS. So our DFS is underway now, which is a study we're doing on our project in Botswana. So after we off-takers, we have off-take contracts in place and DFS is finished, we'll go into our project financing, as you can see on the chart here in 2025. That's what we're up to there. So end of this year, off-takers from our demo plant, and then stage 2 on the strategy, DFS complete and project financing and off-take. And then 2026 we'll commence construction of a commercial plant, and then 27 onwards we'll go into the ramp up. So we're leading into that demand profile increase from manganese that we see coming. So the demonstration plant, which is under construction in Johannesburg, there's actually quite a few on our website which you can have a look at, which show myself and our team talking through the demonstration plant and showing all the work we've done so far this year. The key thing about a demonstration plant, which is important to note, is it's a large facility. It's about 100 meters long, and it is a continuous facility, so we can operate continuously. Why is that important? Well, it enables us to get to a steady state of operations to test our product, so we can be producing a consistent product of specification and also quantity. And this is what off-takers want to see. They want to see this because they want to understand that we can do this as a group. And that's why the demonstration plant is so important for us. You'll see here the plant. It's a 1 to 10 scale of our planned commercial facility, and it enables us to do multiple things. It will enable us to optimize our flow sheet for the DFS for next year, and it enables us to train up staff potentially for the commercial facility and ensure that we can develop operating procedures too. So it is a multifaceted facility, demo plant, and it's something which really sets us aside from other groups because it is, to our understanding, one of the largest facilities of its kind in the world. So that's really quite a special facility. So we discussed the demand profile coming from manganese, and we see a huge amount of requirement for non-Chinese manganese. We see the demand from OEM groups within the US and within the EU who are changing their battery chemistries to have more manganese. You can see our demonstration plant is really pushing towards product this quarter as forecast. So what about the sources of ore for this facility? So we've about 2,000 square kilometers of licenses in Botswana, and from our flagship asset, which is Cahill, we took 100 tons of ore and moved that to our demonstration plant in Johannesburg, and that is what's going to be processed at that facility. The same ore will be processed at our commercial facility in Botswana, and when that starts construction in 26, it'll be processed from there. So we'll be using the same ore, and that's also another vital thing for off-takers. We did a PEA in 2023, which showed for a base case scenario about $1 billion NPV and a $1.5 billion upside. So very strong economics, and we own these outright. The Botswana is a phenomenal place to be developing projects. As I said before, it's routinely ranked best jurisdiction in Africa for mining projects, and also under the Policy Perception Index, it was 4th in the world. So very strong place to be developing projects on the Fraser Institute. And we have a strong support from the government and our local stakeholders. We got our mining license within 9 months, and we got our surface rights secured earlier this year, and our environmental authorization with 9 months too. So very strong support, and that is very quick permitting timelines. I used to be CEO of a lithium developer in the US, and even in the states of Arizona and Nevada, that is, the permitting timelines are considerably longer than that. As you can see from the page here, from what I was talking about earlier, Botswana is ranked 4th from the Policy Perception Index of the Fraser Institute 2023 study. You see the majority of countries, of states and countries in that survey from this top 10 are in US and Canada, and Botswana is the only one in Africa. So it is routinely the top place for developing projects within Africa. We also have applied for a special economic zone status in Botswana, which will enable us to have tax benefits as well. So really positive place for developing projects, and that's what sets our project aside, because manganese does feel a bit like lithium 4 or 5 years ago, and the projects that are now in development are the ones which were at this stage in the lithium market 4 or 5 years ago. So we are ahead of probably there'll be a groundswell of exploration going on in the next 3 or 5 years, and we are now at the stage where we're going into that DFS and project financing at the head of that. So we're one of the groups which is likely to get developed. So we have to go back to Botswana from this, because also the key thing about our plant is, whilst we've developed this proprietary processing technology, the reason why we enables us to make our high purity product is our ore sources. We have these ore sources of manganese oxide ore which have been weathered, and so these impurities have been removed, so they're low impurity, and they enable us to produce a very clean leach, and that's vital for this high purity product, because a lot of the impurities have also been taken out by the natural weathering process. We as a group are obviously very, very important, very focused on ESG and focused on carbon emissions. OEMs who we speak to about our product are constantly talking about how they need to cut their carbon emissions. But we did a LCA back in 2022, which was a life cycle assessment of our project, which showed a low carbon footprint for the project, but potential for us to reduce it even further. Most of the carbon comes from the plant. As you see on this chart here, we have the potential to reduce the carbon footprint from taking out some of the electricity sources to solar, and we have recently got the rights for a solar plant in Botswana. So you can see there's potential for a large proportion of the carbon to be reduced by putting in solar power, because the LCA was done using Botswana grid power. Botswana grid is mostly coal, and then we also have a potential to cut down the carbon in the reagents, and we are doing optimization work now to be able to do that. So a lot of the work we are doing will enable reduction of operating costs and carbon emissions, and that will all feed into the DFS, which we'll announce the results of those test work programs and DFS next year. So we talked through a lot of the key things. Is the demand's coming from manganese. There's a huge amount of requirement for demand of ex-China product. We are in a jurisdiction which enables us to develop our project in the fast track, which is needed to make sure we get into that demand profile of when it was increasing for 27, 28. We've got a huge amount of license and projects in Botswana, so we've got a lot of ore. We've got the proprietary processing technology for our plant, which enables us to produce that high purity product which OEMs want, and we're about to start producing the high purity manganese sulfur monohydrate this quarter for off-taker testing. So everything is very much pushing towards us getting towards our demo plant finish this year, DFS in 2025, and then project and finance in 2025. And we've got a strong team also hopefully able to do this. We've got a very strong background in processing, geology, and also development of projects. And that's the most important thing, is keeping the momentum going and delivering upon this. So from Giyani's perspective, and also from our perspective, we have a phenomenal project where the demonstration plant is coming towards fruition. Commissioning has commenced. Security of supply of this product is vital. The US IRA and the EU CRMA Act are very much showing that we need external ex-China sources of this product and other critical minerals for battery materials. We have the ability to make sure we are ahead of the curve, and looking at the lithium market 4 or 5 years ago, it's a good comparison. Those projects were at this stage for the lithium market are the ones which are now doing well and going fully in development. So we see ourselves at that point. We see ourselves ahead of the game. Manganese is a low carbon battery metal. It is lower carbon than nickel and cobalt. So that's why we believe it's going to be very much used and part of the chemistry mix going forwards. We're able to develop our project in a fast way. We have strong stakeholder support in Botswana, both local and government level, and we've seen that from getting our mining license in 9 months and getting our surface rights and also our environmental authorization in 9 months. We have a credible team to be able to develop this project. We've got proprietary processing technology which enables us to make this high purity product, and we have the ore sources behind it. And those 2 things are the key things, which are secret sourced, and alongside of the jurisdiction, we've got a lot of material catalysts due over the next 18 months. As I said, first product this quarter, going into offtakes in 2025, DFS 25, project financing 25, construction 26, and then ramping up the commercial facility 27 onwards. We've got a good amount of funding in place from 2 very strategic partners. So really huge amount of positive in place for Giyani, and please let me know of any questions.
Thank you, Charles, for the very informative presentation. We'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And we already do have a few questions here. First, looking at the specific minerals here, are there manganese carbonate minerals present, such as rhodochrosite and kutnerite? And if yes, is their presence beneficial for minerals processing?
Well, our ore sources are manganese oxide ore sources, and there are obviously a lot of projects out there of manganese carbonate. I'm a geologist by background, and for me, the exciting thing about manganese oxide is it has been weathered. So that means that that carbon element doesn't need to be released. So a lot of projects which are manganese carbonate have to release the carbon, so that they are very much higher carbon footprint. We don't have that. We've got a manganese oxide ore source. So for us, we do not have any manganese carbonate, and that's very beneficial for us from many angles.
Okay, great. And looking at the project economics, what is the total capex and I guess all-in sustaining cost, operating cost?
Well, the study which was done in 2023 is the only numbers I can quote, because the DFS ongoing now is obviously, we can't announce that because that is an ongoing study. The capex from 2023 was 283 million, and the opex was sort of in the 1,500 to 2,000 range, but it was in that sort of marker. But we are very much focused on reduction of opex, and we expect that to be lower than the 2023 PEA. And capex wise, again, we expect a similar number, but obviously the PEA was 80,000 ton per year production. When our DFS, we're looking at around that, maybe slightly higher, sort of in the 80 to 100,000 tons. So obviously you have increased throughput, increased production. There's potential for a capex change, but we're going to try and keep it very similar to the 2023 study.
Okay, great. And I had a couple of similar questions here, but I guess one is, what are relationships like with local communities? And are there surface owners or community groups that you have to work with on access?
Well, the good thing about Botswana is they have a very strong history in mining, and they've got a very, very good relationship. They've had a lot of successful diamond mines in country, and the country is trying to diversify away from diamond mining. So we are very supported by the government and also the local government and also local tribes and elders as well. So we've got a lot of support. People are very positive towards mining, and we really have a huge amount of support. Yeah, it's very positive. We've got a very strong ESG team, very strong in-country country manager, Elisa, who is a Botswana native, and she is a geologist too, and she's been very strong and very front and center in driving our community support programs. We've got some. We went to speak. Went to the Paramount Chief's birthday earlier this year, and he's a very vital person in our area. Elisa is also very much part of the community. She has been doing some programs, and there'll be some announcements out in the not too distant future on our community outreach programs and our support of the local community.
Okay, great. And then following up, we did have a question about look at the personnel side. Then looking at recruitment. When would you start looking to recruit additional people? Obviously, looking forward to construction and operations, and perhaps obviously Botswana has fairly active mining, but it's also competitive for people. So, how would you look to recruit people?
Well, we have a very good presence in Botswana, and we have a group of geologists who work for us who are based there, who are Botswanans. And right now, obviously, we are quite early on in the studies phase. We don't need to start recruiting for the mine site as of yet, and that is something we'd look towards next year once DFS is finalised and once we sort of understand the requirements of personnel.
Okay, great. And we do have a question here about looking forward to thinking about the funding of the CapEx. How would you plan to fund CapEx? And we always have an ever popular question of how much cash do you have now and how far will that last with current plans?
Well, the cash question, as I mentioned earlier, the last announced one was end of Q2. We had just under 90 million Canadian in cash, and then another 12 million Canadian to draw from our IDC facility. So the IDC, who have supported us in the facility, they're a very supportive group. The IDC is a fantastic partner because they need to deploy about $1 billion every year. So, per our project financing, they've indicated potential interest. So you can see that's potential partner for that. We are also talking to strategics, and that's another area we're very interested to pursue, because we are getting a lot of interest from strategic groups who either have manganese interests or want to get involved with them. So there's a lot of interest in the market for funding this and developing this from a JV and or strategic investment perspective. And then the good thing about our project is we don't have a huge capex to look for. We have an achievable capex, which is vital for this sort of project.
Great. And we do have a couple of questions looking at some of the nuts and bolts of manganese. Are the off-takers that you're speaking with also using manganese from China?
Yeah, well, with for example, the IRA rulings, they raise their percentage, which has to come from the non-Chinese sources each year, up to getting to 100% in certain elements and 80% in other elements of it. So the requirements are increasing year on. That's why we're seeing a manganese demand kick on from 27, 28 going forwards. So a lot of these groups are using manganese from China now because that's really the only supply for it. But a lot of projects are coming development, which will really push that demand growth of non-Chinese or non-FEOC, so foreign entity of concern, which is the IRA states it, sources of manganese. So we are speaking to these groups, and they are they're obviously pushing low carbon and high ESG, and for us that's really what we're centered about. So we're very much in discussions with all the groups you can imagine on potential for supplying them and their projects within North America and the EU.
Great. And we do have one question here. It gets into some of the specifics here, but what is the current price of MSM in Europe? And do new chemistries such as LMFP use MSM or EMM?
So, very good questions. There is currently no spot price in the EU. There is one group called Vibrant who do produce manganese. That is not a widely known price because it's a very well kept market, but we do have indications that they do sell their manganese at a multiple of the Chinese price. I wouldn't want to sort of speculate what that is. So we are seeing a premium currently in Europe for high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate compared to China. So whilst the Chinese price is lower, we do see a higher price in EU currently, and this perceptions we are seeing from groups who are forecasting this is likely to be a higher price in the EU and US versus China going forwards. From a perspective of which manganese chemical we can use in batteries, it's true for NMC batteries you generally use high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate, so HPMSM, but for LMFP you can use either the sulfate form, oxide form, or the carbonate form, depending on the battery chemistry and how you construct it. So we are looking into other options too. We're looking into the option to use oxide and or carbonate potentially, but right now we're focused on sulfate, and we have the optionality to potentially produce oxide or carbonate, and we're looking at that if that is a vital thing, because we want to make sure we are staying ahead of the market and staying with the movements in manganese development.
Okay. And maybe one I'll follow up with, well, I guess we did have one other question come in. Are you concerned about impurities in your manganese ore?
No, we are very lucky. We've got whilst the grade profile of our manganese oxide deposits is quite conservative, the beauty of manganese oxide is it's already been weathered. So a lot of impurities have been taken out, and it enables us, and we produce a very clean leach from that product. So we actually have a very clean leach to start with, and the process refines that and then takes out the manganese. So our end product is very high purity, and indications of test what we've done so far is it is hitting the key OEM spec which they require. So no concern at all.
Okay, great. And maybe following up on that, and kind of in general, you've spoken with off-takers and kind of touched on some elements of what they look for. But what are the off-takers looking for from your pilot plant study?
So I must say, Tim, it's much more than a pilot plant. It's a demonstration plant.
Demonstration plant, I should say. Yes.
It's a pretty commercial facility. It is, and that's the key thing. You know, a lot of pilot facilities can be multiple facilities and are and go through a process of producing a product from different labs and things. We have one facility. It's continuous. We have an on-site lab, which enables us to go into continuous steady state operations to test and adjust our process to make sure we're producing that consistent spec product. So it's 100 meters long, the pilot plant, 15 meters high. It's like a small plant. It really is phenomenal facility. From our understanding, it has the capacity to produce up to 600 kilos a day of high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate, which our understanding is South 32 are doing a project in Arizona, and I know they're going to be doing a demo plant. And I think their demo plant seems like it has a similar potential capacity to ours. So you can see the scale we're at in our project compared to our peers who are serious companies, and we're only a small company compared to them. So we are really taking this very seriously, and our facility will enable us to produce up to 600 kilos a day, depending on grade and things. So we have enough capacity to produce all the product required for off-taker testing. Off-takers processes generally in two phases. Initial phase will be we'll send them a small amount of samples in the sort of 1 to 10 kilos, and they'll test that. And then if they like that, we'll come into a phase 2 where we send them much more, so 100 kilos or a ton or so, and then that will be mazed into a coin battery, a single battery, a slab battery, and then pushed into a full facility, full car. So that's how they ramp up their testing and qualification process.
And we do have a few questions, a little more on the kind of different corporate aspects. But one question about the board votes and going from 5 to 4 board members. What is the rationale?
Well, so that's the AGM people are talking about. So we currently have 5 board members. So we have Mark Burnett, who's our interim chair. We have Stephanie Hart, who is our audit committee chair. We have Thuso, who's our Botswana board member. and we have Alex, who's our representative from Arch. And we still have Danny Keating, who is obviously the CEO, has left. He is still on the board. So the proposal for the AGM is to have just the 4 board members, and then Danny is left off that board, that suggestion for the AGM.
Okay. And I'll ask one more on the corporate side, and then we did have a few more technical questions come in. But do you have any plans for a proper U.S. listing in the near term?
We don't have any plans for US listing. That's an interesting question. We always keep our options open for things which could help the company's development, but no current plans.
Okay, great. We do have a couple of questions then circling back on the product that you would produce. One question: will you charge OEM for offtake MSM? It was previously mentioned as a good source of revenue for the company.
So this facility is not for selling manganese. This facility is for multiple things. It's for off-taker qualification. It is for optimization of our flow sheet. It's for training of staff. But yeah, it is not for selling a product. I think it would be. It's not a helpful thing for us to do. We need to make sure our product gets qualified and we get offtake contracts. And the amount we'll be giving to offtakers is such a small amount. I don't think we would be. There's no requirement for selling it.
Okay. And looking forward to when you would look to sell product, what type of percent premium would you expect to be able to sell HP MSM versus Chinese products?
Well, with manganese, battery manganese being it is quite a immature market, and there are a few forecasts out there with different outlooks. A lot of the prices we are seeing forecast in the EU and US region in the longer term range from $2,500 a ton to $4,500 a ton. So you can see, that's the sort of range we're seeing. So you can see something in those ranges probably a realistic thing to look at.
Great, and I guess we had one that was it was more of a statement, but development in the near term, I guess, essentially confirming the timing of things a little bit, but development in revenue and looking at EBITDA in 2027 to 2030. So maybe when would you maybe give us a little bit of an overview of the development timeline? You had spoken about it a bit during the presentation, but when would you plan to start construction? How long would that take? When would you look for production and revenues?
So the current timeline is going into production from 2026 onwards. We expect a 18-month window for construction, and then we're allowing a 2-year window for ramp up, but we assume it should be quicker than that, especially from having the demonstration plant. Having the demonstration plant will enable us to operate it and to de-risk the commercial facility of ramp up. So we expect that to enable us to ramp up quicker. So with us ramping up from 2027 onwards, we'll be able to really push into that increased manganese demand curve, which starts from 27, 28 onwards, where we see a lot of OEM groups are looking to implement those higher manganese chemistries into their outlook and their supply lines.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions that we had come in. Maybe just to review, what are some key catalysts or key news items that we might look forward to from the company in the coming weeks and months?
So there's the obvious first product. So we've had our commissioning commencement, which is obviously a vital thing. And first product coming out of the plant will be obviously a key catalyst coming forward. There will be the special economic zone application. That's another one, which is very important because our plant will be in there, which will enable a lot of tax savings. And then going into next year, we'll have the off-taker process. So we'll have MOUs coming from off-takers, indicative terms. That'd be quite an exciting one for us as a group because that'll set the scene for the project financing. And then from there, we have the DFS, and then going into project financing. So the next 18 months, we have a huge amount of stuff coming from the company. And as said, we are in a phenomenal jurisdiction. Botswana is a place which is supportive of mining. They want to diversify away from diamonds, and they want to push towards battery metals. We have a huge amount of support in country, government level, and also local level. We've got our mining license in 9 months. We've got our environmental authorization in 9 months. We've secured our surface rights for our mine and also our solar plant. So a huge amount of things coming for the company and pushing into that interesting, exciting manganese demand, which we'll see coming. All the groups are pushing towards that, especially for the NMC. Groups are trying to reduce nickel because of the high carbon content and the localization in Indonesia and the refinement from China. And then again, cobalt. Cobalt is hugely produced in the DRC and then refined in China and has a higher carbon content than manganese. So all these things are driving groups to do that. And also manganese is much more cost competitive than nickel and cobalt. So that's from the NMC side of things. And then LMFP, adding that manganese to the LFP enables that extra range and increase the energy density. So again, manganese really does very positive for batteries, and we see a strong future for it.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank Charles FitzRoy for presenting today. And thank you everyone on the line for tuning in. Note that Red Cloud Securities will be back next Wednesday afternoon when our webinar series continues with Aztec Minerals presenting Wednesday, October 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great day and happy investing.